Hey guys, thanks for joining me here on the Come Reason podcast. I just wanted to let you know that if you enjoy these shows, you can gain access to a lot of additional content by becoming a Come Reason Defender. With your tax-deductible gift of $25 a month, you'll be able to view exclusive videos, debates, and presentations, even by top scholars such as Dr. J.P. Moreland, Sean McDowell, J. Warner Wallace, Dr. Hugh Ross, and many, many more. Plus, our Defenders Library provides PowerPoint presentations and notes used to develop these podcasts. So check it out by logging on to the comereason.org/defenders page on the website and see all the benefits your support provides. And thank you for supporting Come Reason Ministries. Technology. In our desire to make our lives easier, faster, and more efficient, we've relied on the tools that we have created in order to help us in our daily tasks. Of course, in the 21st century, a lot of that is dictated through computers, smartphones, and the apps that power these devices. Now, it's been a great boon for a lot of humanity. But what are the drawbacks? And what about any dangers we may be facing as well? Hi, everyone. I'm Lenny Esposito, and on this Come Let Us Reason Together, we're back at the radio studio with the apologetics.com guys, Dr. Harry Edwards and Dr. Jacob Daniel, to talk about the dangers and drawbacks that might also accompany our technological reliance. For as we become more and more dependent upon our technology, we sometimes don't realize how it can lead us astray and actually strip us of our humanity. It's not all bad, of course, but we need to be able to be discerning, as Christians especially, in understanding what are the benefits and what are the detriments in using this powerful new tool. So I hope you enjoy this conversation on this Come Let Us Reason Together.
I'm Harry Edwards, your host for the evening, and tonight we'll be discussing how technology shapes us, the adverse effects of it, and how we ought to steward it. We want to strike a healthy balance. We're not here to say that technology's bad, nor are we going to say that technology is always a positive force. It was 2007 when Steve Jobs first introduced the iPhone to us, and 19 years later, we are living under Jobs' prophetic landscape since he said during his keynote address that the iPhone is like having your life in your pocket. He had no idea what his words would later mean. Now we feel like we can't live without our smartphones. Pew Research study in 2015 showed that 46% of Americans said it is something, quote, they couldn't live without, end quote. What's ironic is that we are more connected than ever before, and yet we feel we've never been more disconnected from each other. It's no wonder Gen Z is a restless generation, and suicide rates among them are the highest compared to the generations that preceded them. We get notifications, we get likes, our phones tell us what to do, when to do it. We become slaves to it. What happened to us, fellas? What happened to us? And so joining me in the studio tonight are my good friends and partners in ministry, Dr. Jacob Daniel and Lenny Esposito. Together we'll tackle this important topic. What has happened to us in terms of our connection to technology, and particularly our cell phones, our devices. And I know, maybe some of our audience might think we're hypocrites because we're doing a show and there's technology everywhere. Yeah. So where do we draw the line? Let's talk about this. What happened to us, guys? But before you answer that, I want to go and find out how you guys are doing with your lives, your ministry. Lenny, let's start with you.
Well, ministry's been good, been very busy, actually producing lots of content in order for people to understand the craziness of this world. A lot of so the YouTube channel at comereason.org has been bustling with lots of interviews. And then, of course, we've been involved with the Kirkwood Center as well. So that has been keeping me busy. And So over the course of the summer, I'm hoping to work on a project that I'm doing, putting together a curriculum of history for the church and how that relates to both apologetics and theology. Pulling it all together, hope to get that out within a year. So a video curriculum and things like that people would be able to avail themselves of and learn.
You're doing the lecture all by yourself?
We've already filmed them all. So yeah, it's going to be a 16-week course, or you can do it in either an 8-session or 16-session. You just have to double them up one way or the other. So now we have to take all the raw footage and edit it all together and stuff like that. So
wow.
It's entitled The Hidden Riches of Christian History is what we're calling it. So.
I love it. Love it. How about you, Dr. Jacob Daniel?
Good to be here, Harry. And let me begin by saying I'm so grateful for the social media, for all the opportunities, and also for this opportunity to be on the air and just share the truth of the gospel and how does that impact our life. As you mentioned, Lenny, I want to point our listeners to one recent podcast that we did, which has been getting some good response. Yesterday was International Yoga Day.
Oh.
And we did a show on why you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And the reason, we gave some reasons as to why Christians should be really careful about considering doing yoga. So I would encourage our listeners to maybe subscribe to the Kirkwood Center on YouTube. That's the name of the channel, the Kirkwood Center. And listen to that show and see how the Lord will direct your heart to help others as well.
Your hands have been full with other tasks as well.
Exactly.
Literally, hands full.
Hands full. Yeah, grateful for our first baby. I say first. I don't know how many are going to be following our baby, but yeah, it's been full. Yeah, grateful for our daughter. Who turned 6 weeks.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into our topic, gentlemen. And I know, Lenny, you're the one that suggested we do this, and I'm glad you did. I've been wanting to do this for a while, but it could get pretty heady if we're not careful. But the specific direction I want to take this to is not that technology is bad. All throughout history, we've always railed against changes, like, the TV in the 1950s, that's going to be a corrupting force, or, oh my goodness, the automobile, that's going to be a corrupting force, so on and so forth, right? So now we enter into the early 2000s and we have the internet, and some have compared it to the printing press. In fact, the printing press, when it first came out, the religious leaders had said, it destroyed the church. Well, you can imagine why, but of course it did not. So what's going on with technology? Or I was going to say, particularly, how does technology shape us unawares? That's the more important thing.
Well, so here's kind of the impetus for this. There was a friend of ours, philosophy guy, J.R. Miller, who asked a question. Has the convenience of live streaming, he asks, eroded the value that Christians place on congregational worship? And that's kind of a tough question to answer. I was a little hesitant on it, and he, I kind of pushed back. I said, I don't know that the live streaming erodes the value that Christians place on congregational worship. I think it erodes possibly the number of Christians who avail themselves of that opportunity. And he says, I was just trying to voice it out. I said, I think many Christians hold communal worship as a higher standard than, say, streaming. I do believe that. I believe streaming has value for example, people who are shut-ins, for individuals who are sick and can't come to church that Sunday morning. They don't want to miss the service. They don't want to miss them. They're following along with the pastor in their congregation. They're traveling sometimes. That's possible. But people also will do a cost-benefit analysis. And while they would hold high in-person worship as a value, they may also say, but, I really want to get my 9 holes in. So if I stream it while I'm on the road, I'm kind of doing the same thing. It's not quite as good as being there, but it's close, right?
Close enough.
And so this cost-benefit analysis starts to come in, and it becomes more reflective, more self-driven in its desire. And I was talking about this with a couple of pastors, and they came back and said, yeah, but it does help you if you're in another city, like one of our pastors who was going up to Washington in order to watch his grandchildren. He said, so we were able to join with the community. I said, that's great, but what did you lose? Because I remember when a friend and I were traveling, and we went to Chicago, and this was, in the mid-'80s, late 80s. And we said, well, we want to go to church. So what did you do? You looked up where are the local churches, and that time we were doing a Calvary Chapel. So what is the Calvary Chapel in Chicago? Okay, it's this place. We'd had taxi drivers drive us there. Turns out it's a house church. It's happening in the basement, right? And we sit down there with 12 other people, and we had an experience that if live streaming was available to us, where we would have just sat in our hotel room and said, okay, we did church, that would have been okay. But we would have lost the value of meeting other Christians who we don't know, who we'll never probably talk with again, and sharing a bond and understanding that the church is broader than just our pastor, our congregation. So there's a social loss there, isn't there? The live streaming actually narrows that experience to only us.
Yeah.
And so here's the balance. It can be beneficial. There are shut-ins. There are individuals. There are times where you want to make sure that you're keeping up with the series, right? But there are disadvantages as well. And we never take the disadvantages into account. At least we don't take the full series of disadvantages into account. It starts to become easier to justify doing the easy way as opposed to doing what's valuable.
Yeah, what a great point, Lenny. And I think to add to that, I would say that we need to understand, time and again I remind friends and people in my life, is that worship for us is an embodied experience. If we are the body of Christ, it does matter when we bring our bodies together in worship unto God. And we with online, we can definitely miss that aspect of coming together in person and sharpening each other and building each other and worshiping God in spirit and in truth. The other thing I would mention is that to answer your question, Harry, we need to recognize that we have shifted. Our world has shifted from agents shaping tools to tools shaping agents. That's where we've come to, right? We used to handle tools that we could put to rest. Now it seems like we need tools to put ourselves to rest in some sense. And I think that shift has happened, and we need to recognize that. So somehow we had a world where we understood the importance of catechism. I always use that term, right?
That's your favorite word.
Favorite word, yeah. We are catechized by the culture and also cultural products. So we need to recognize the importance of that, and that is true with social media, true with all the tools that we have made available in this world that we live in. So we can't ignore that fact. Now the question is that how are we going to manage what's available to us? And this might be a weird connection, but let me say this has to be done just the way we do our governance, for example. When we establish a government, especially with the American experience, you have this idea of putting precautions, putting measures where there is proper accountability that is maintained.
Yeah, you assume government is evil, and therefore you protect against it. It's necessary.
And it's a very proactive measure. Even the founders understood that.
Right. That's
and
why
they put the measures of checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's exactly what we should be doing with social media, exactly doing with technological advancement, that we, as a church in particular, we got to be proactive and not just reactive. Ethics has to be done proactively in the realm of digital media. That's what I would say. And if we are able to do that, we would make use of these great tools that we have. And someone once said that we have more slaves in our pocket today than a king had in his whole realm at one time. which is true,
Yep.
right? How do we actually manage those workers and make use of those tools is the question in front of them, front of us. And I think we should be very diligent in putting right measures now so that even a future generation would benefit from these tools that are made available.
This reminds me of a popular quote by Thoreau back in the 1800s when the railroad system was just beginning to emerge. He said, "We do not ride the railroad, it rides upon us." Mm-hmm. So even back then, he understood how sometimes new technology could own us, could enslave us. In that vein, what do you guys think about some of our technology, some of our devices? How does that enslave us?
Well, again, I mean, you had mentioned in the beginning that, we worried about radio, we worried about television and things like that. And there were some causes for concern. Obviously, folks like Malcolm Muggeridge took television to task pretty stiffly, specifically because he understood that by the 70s, there was a pretty sophisticated model. You had the Nielsen rating system, and you started getting enough feedback from enough individuals to know what would be the best way to pander to a large audience, to attract a larger audience. And of course, given that humanity is sinful, you're going to show more salacious types of programming, things like that. But online is fundamentally different in two ways. First of all, it doesn't seek, it's not a single channel voice going out to the broadest audience possible. It's individualized. So that's the first difference is every message that you get is custom tailored to you. It's specific on your reactions and your devices. And secondly, the algorithm is created specifically so that you as an individual will continue to engage with it for its sake, not for your sake. And those two things make it much more active in drawing you away than television or radio ever did. Television and radio could only hope to reach a broad base.
That's true.
But they also had to mitigate against the fact that a certain amount of their audience would be possibly offended by this. Now you don't have to necessarily worry about offending because nobody else will necessarily have the exact same experience you'll have. And so that's a big difference in what technology is capable of doing now than what it had the ability to do previously.
Yeah, Os Guinness puts it this way. He used to say that it used to be one to the many, but now it's everyone from everywhere. Right? Yeah. And everyone has an opinion about everything and from everywhere. And I think that's what you're talking about. That has, instead of bringing us together, it has isolated us.
Yes, and it allows those small voices, those little individuals who would not necessarily be significant in the larger population to have an outsized impact because, number one, they're the ones that are making all the posts, and number two, even when they inflame other people, they get clicks. And what happens is now it becomes so frequent upon people's streams that people think that more individuals hold that view than is actually true.
And you, Lenny, you and I grew up in the 80s, and we were talking during the break that today's culture, one of the major differences is that there aren't a lot of binding forces for us. And so we are more alone, we feel disconnected. But to give examples, right, in the 80s, like you were saying, everybody knew what song was popular, and you all listened to the same pop music because it happened in only one time, whatever the station played, and you all waited for it. It's not like you could just play your music anytime unless you bought the single.
Right.
And usually those, you couldn't even buy a single. It had to be an album.
If you're in the car, you're listening to whatever's on the radio.
Right. And everyone's listening to it.
Everyone's listening to that same station because there's only a few of them in town.
And
and three major television stations, right? That was ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was it.
That's right. And so, based on that, it's like every Friday, one of your favorite shows came on at 7, and everyone, all of your classmates knew that you guys were going to tune in on this channel at 7 p.m. And then next week, you guys would talk about the same thing, And so I know you're a little too young for that, and you didn't experience that, Jacob. But I do remember those fun times. Now that I'm a parent,
they gave us a sense of cultural bonding.
Yes, for sure.
And an idea that we could make reference of something and at least talk about it sensibly because it would evoke conversation, right? It would, you could, remember when The Burning Bed came out, Farrah Fawcett tried to, about domestic violence. This is why they would always do those very special episode things, because they were trying to instill in culture a cultural conversation. And sometimes that worked better than, the whole project of the MASH series was to be anti-war. That was the whole point. Even though it was set in Korea, it was really an anti-Vietnam piece. So it would fuel our discussions, and people could push back and forth on it. Now that doesn't happen because people aren't faced with a popular show that maybe they disagree with. They just don't watch anything that they disagree with. Right. And so before, since there was only a few selected pieces, you watched it anyway. You may not have liked the song, but you've always heard it, and you had to think about it.
Right.
I have to throw out an idea. Maybe if our listener is interested in doing their research work, maybe they should look into the usage of idioms, because idioms are based on common context.
Sure.
So do we use enough idioms today?
Yeah.
Maybe we don't, because we don't have common context today.
There are no new ones.
Yes.
It really is. And film is kind of the only cultural referent that still binds us.
Yeah.
I tell people, I named my fourth son Lucas so I can walk up to him and say, Luke, I am your father. And see, I don't have to ever explain that. Here's a good example.
Right.
I don't have to explain that. But if I say, Mama always told me not to look into the eyes of the sun, but Mama, that's where the fun is. Nobody, will people get that reference because they don't know the song. So
let me also add something to this, and I think we need to actually look into this aspect as well, because I firmly believe it's a gift of the Christian Christian worldview to the world. The loss of words. Why I'm saying that is because I think clarity in communication is when you have proximity to the objectivity of that which needs to be communicated.
Okay.
Even God demands of Moses to write down the 10 Commandments for a reason. The disciples understood it necessary to write down the word of God, right? There's a reason. And I think with social media, especially the kind that we have today, we are creating a distance from written word in some sense.
Yes.
It's more on the basis of pictures and visuals.
Right.
Because in so doing, we are adopting this idea into our psyche that, yes, truly, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, or meaning is in the mind of the beholder, in some sense, of whatever they are seeing it. So there is no objectivity there. And I think that's a big loss to have in a culture that we live in today.
So this is a really important point, because in another article that we just talked about, John Stonestreet made this point that what modern digital culture has done, especially the Zoom generation, but also Instagram, YouTube, things of this nature, because video is prevalent, three things are happening. First of all, we're looking at ourselves in our frame, right? We're always concerned about how do we look, how do we come off. Little kids know how to pose. Well, we're going to take a selfie, and they get into these, especially little girls will get into these poses that you go, okay, that came a little too naturally to you, and the pucker face and things like this. You're going like, you're not supposed to even know how to do that stuff.
Even
yet.
2-year-olds are doing that.
So the fact that they are so self-aware, and how that means that when they're communicating with others, they're always thinking about themselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that outside the frame, we know that things aren't as great as they would be, right? And I always make this point, we've all seen this as Christians. You go on Instagram and you see you have the little journal on the table and the coffee mug and the pen placed just so with the Bible open and, #blessed morning devotions, right? We've seen. Now, everybody looks at that And what they don't see is the bed's not made. The kid has thrown up in the back, right? They don't see outside the frame. So what's fascinating is people know that outside the frame exists, but they never say, oh, well, I don't have to use this as my measuring stick. They still use the image as the ideal. All these other Christians they seem to have their lives together. Mine's falling apart. I must not be a good Christian. And every once in a while that cracks. I mean, you remember 6 or 7 years ago, Robert Kelly, he was a BBC analyst who was doing a report, and the two toddlers come in the room. Great. Why did everybody love that? Because that was the one time that the frame cracked and everything spilled out. And you said, reality. And then the best part of that entire episode was when the mom comes in and she tries to stay on all fours, but she's trying to grab the toddlers to drag.
She's still in the frame.
Drag him out, and you can see the desperation that she has. But you see, that's the problem that we have. That's one of the reasons that we're supposed to go to church together, is to tell each other, hey, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. We don't even, I know church, we don't even do that. We still want to be what I call Pinterest perfect, but we need to share our burdens with one another. That's what we're commanded to do. And we don't do that. And online makes it 10 times worse, because it gives you an artificial value line against which you're measuring yourself. And it's not true.
Which has caused a lot of anxiety, especially among the young people, because they feel like they have to keep up with the Joneses, and they feel inadequate. Like you were saying, oh, wow, look, so-and-so is doing really well, and look at me, I'm not. And it just forces us to look either inward in an unhealthy sense, or it leads to all sorts of issues. Some of the words you hear are like exhaustion or restlessness. I introduced a term a while ago, like anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E, and it's just this idea that things are hopeless and you lose all standards and values. It's almost one level below hopelessness. It's not a good feeling to have. And like I was sharing a while ago, Jonathan Haidt said that anomie is the leading cause of suicides in the UK today. And it's attributed to social media. In fact, there is a lawsuit against Facebook and other social media platforms because it's been shown that the developers created it with an addictive factor built in.
And this is why you mentioned about making your bed. That's why Jordan Peterson begins with that in bringing about a change in an individual. Make your bed, right? That's the authentic self in one sense, which is not usually reflected through the frame that
if you know
we see on
that
social
what you're
media.
doing, and you treat yourself with a little bit of respect, understanding that, we'll have to talk about this as well, the whole idea of going to the grocery store saying your pajama bottoms. They're used, the idea of manners was you don't dress for yourself, you dress for others. Because you're respectful of their experiences more than your own.
Well, I think I hear the music coming on. So tonight we have been discussing how technology shapes us, the adverse effects of it, and how we ought to properly steward it. You've been listening to apologetics.com, and we will be right back after a station break. Well, welcome back to the second half hour of the apologetics.com radio show, where we challenge believers to think and thinkers to believe. I'm Harry Edwards, your host for this evening, and in the studio with me are my good friends and ministry partners, Lenny Esposito and Dr. Jacob Daniel. And we have been talking about technology and how it shapes us, the adverse effects of it, and how we ought to steward it. So I want to start things off by, again, this is our second half hour. There's a story about this comedian, you might recognize the name, Louis C.K., and he shared in this story how he does not allow his kids to have cell phones. And he explained, and this is what he said. He said, you need to build an ability to just be yourself and not be doing something. That's what the phones are taking away. he said, underneath in your life, there's that thing, that forever empty, that knowledge that it's all for nothing and you're alone. That's why we text and drive, because we don't want to be alone for a second. I thought that was pretty insightful from Mr. Louis C.K. So yeah, we're afraid, I guess, of the unknown. So we have to be distracted. And we get this from Pascal. He would say that probably the worst thing in life is we are so distracted.
Yeah.
We just can't focus on what's important.
I think boredom has got so much negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
I think it's very formative in many sense. It brings us to a place of reflection. I think if we as individuals look around and find out what are some of the things that enables reflection in our lives, I don't think we can count many things.
Not
right?
today, yeah.
And social media is no way helping us to actually form that kind of habit in our lives. And this is why I think I think you might talk about this. There's a need for us to regulate our habits surrounding social media. Very much important. I think church has to step up and do and help the church, help its member to recognize and understand how we're going to do that.
Well, you brought up church. It's interesting, but Andrew Sullivan, an author that I think you need to read, he has an article that got published 2015, I Used to Be a Human Being, where he talks about really his journey from being, and he's an intellectual, and he was an early adopter, and he just got burnt out. He said here, if the churches came to understand that the greatest threat to faith today is not hedonism, but distraction, perhaps they might begin to appeal anew to a frazzled digital generation.
Wow.
I thought that was insightful.
So you had mentioned Pascal. Let me give you two passages from Pence's. So you got to remember this
Ponce.
Ponce.
Yeah.
So this is written in the 16th century, right? So he says this is 653. We're not satisfied with the life we have in ourselves and in our own being. We want to live an imaginary life in the minds of others. And for this purpose, we endeavor to make an impression. We labor constantly to embellish and preserve this imaginary being and neglect the real one. And if we are calm or generous or faithful, we're eager to make it known so as to attach these virtues to our other being. Then he goes on to say, we would rather separate them from ourselves to unite them with the other. We would willingly be cowards to acquire the reputation for being brave. This is a great sign of our own being's nothingness, of not being satisfied with the one without the other, and of renouncing the one for the other. For whoever would not die to save his or her honor would be infamous. Then he goes on to say, ultimately, we are so presumptuous that we would wish to be known by all the world, even by people who shall come after, that when we shall be no more. And we are so vain that the esteem of 5 or 6 neighbors delights and contents us. That's Facebook.
Yeah.
Just 5
Prophetic.
or 6 likes. That's all I need. And
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Blaise Pascal is someone you ought to read.
If only
everyone,
he could
yeah.
compile his works in a manner that, it would be more. I mean, his sections are so much divided.
Sure.
Well, they were
just thoughts.
notes.
Yeah.
They were
notes,
notes for a project he was going to
Yes.
write,
Yeah.
and he was so brilliant that you published the notes, and
That's
it becomes
right.
one of the world's bestsellers.
That's right. That's good stuff. All right. I know, Lenny, you brought up the whole idea of definitely the destructive forces of social media, that they are now banning it in the LA USD.
Yeah, the LA Unified School District. Actually, Gavin Newsom has been trying to push this through in the state. At the state level, there is an assembly bill that's being talked about, Assembly Bill 3216, that was introduced in February, that would require school districts to adopt a policy to limit or prohibit students' use of smartphones while at school. But the LA Unified School District has already adopted this policy, and it's going to go into effect effect in January. And Nick Melvion, who spearheaded the resolution, says, quote, our students are glued to their cell phones, not unlike adults. They're surreptitiously scrolling in school, in class time, or have their head in their hands walking down the hallways. They're not talking to each other or playing at lunch or recess because they've got AirPods in, and they're shutting themselves off. And I think this is one of the great ironies of social media, is it actually diminishes our social contact. Yeah. Everything has gone through the screens. And what they're finding, the reason why this is such a bad aspect for young people especially, is not because they're cheating on tests. It's not because they're simply wanting to read something on their phone instead of listening to the teacher. It's the fact that kids themselves feel pressure because they have to be vigilant in order to make sure that they're answering their friends or reacting to their friends' posts, which means that then their friends then have to start and react to their posts, and down the line it goes. You see, the most important aspect of a young person's life is his status within his social circle. So if you wait too long to like something that your friend posted, they're going to come at you and say, well, why did you take so long? Why did you have to think about it?
Right, you don't like me anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
right. I mean, what's the worst thing you can do is if you unfriend somebody on Facebook, that's like the worst diss of, you've blocked me on Instagram.
It's like that's a slap in the face.
Absolutely. And this is, so the virtual world takes precedence over the real world. And by banning phones, what kids are doing is they feel actual freedom. I don't have to worry about answering my friends anymore because they all know that I can't. Yeah. So there's no subtext to it.
An expert in this by the name of Sherry Turkle, I thought had a keen insight on this. So it's not uncommon where you find families together, let's say at a restaurant, eating together, but each of them are buried in their phones, in their devices. So she came up with a good descriptor for this. They're alone together.
Yes.
So you have that phenomenon now where, like you were saying, Lenny, how social media, it's ironic that it's not social, it's just media. you take out the social out of social media, and it's really not social media. So here are just some of the bad effects of technology. In fact, Turkle also came up with this term to describe how we have our real lives, but then we superimpose it with our digital lives, and she calls it life mix. And just the two don't really blend well together. You know, it's just like, for instance, here's a good example. There was a time when you surfed the internet and it was a specific location and time, and then you came out and emerged into the real world. Well, now with our cell phones, we've figured out a way to make the portable. You know, so now you're just glued literally all the time.
I liked what Andrew Sullivan said, is if an alien had visited Earth in 2005 and then came back and visited Earth today, 20 years later, he would have said, what happened? Because everybody walks around looking at this one device. They're zombies. That's all that they do. Yeah. You don't have any engagement. You don't look outside the window. You don't see what's going on.
I think there has also been another shift if we see with the technological advancement. We're talking more on the side of software, right? All the social media softwares, applications, and everything available. Even the hardware behind or the programming behind it does not require you to socialize with each other.
Yeah.
There's something called remote work now, right? So we have shifted from a world that engaged in theology and philosophy that required you to engage with each other, that kind of world, to a world that emphasizes, even the financial world, you don't have to really be socializing with each other on a personal level. Well, so we are more in an economic world, a digital world, where there's more distance is permissible, even for you to be accomplishing certain tasks. That never used to be the case earlier. So I think with regards to what could be done is the church therefore has a role in socializing or teaching people how to socialize with each other. in-person socializing, right? That's very much important. And church is the great avenue where that happens. Family is where that really happens. And we have to have institutions. And with online learning now, even we are not coming to universities or colleges, to a building to learn anymore. And how is it that we can reclaim that again and bring it back to church?
That's a really important point, because, and I'm gonna touch on both those aspects, both learning and work, because they're both finding out certain things are true. When you do it online, when you move out, and this is clearly true when we look at the stats from the children through the pandemic who went to online school. When you move online, you lose something in the process, in the interaction. You colleges, when there's a professor that's giving a lecture and a kid starts to ask, and I talked to a friend of ours who was Professor Robert Stewart at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. They had in-class learning and remote learning, and there were 2 or 3 campuses. But his call was to move to each campus and at least do one in-person lecture at each one. And when he was lecturing in New Orleans, he thought, man, these Fort Worth guys, they're not expressive, they're not engaging, they're not asking the questions, even though it's real time and I've got a screen of them and they've got a screen of me. But when he moved to Fort Worth, all of a sudden the Fort Worth people came alive and they were asking the questions and they were having the discussion, and his New Orleans folks were just sitting there passively watching. And they found this to be true in the workplace as well. One of the things that you lose is the water cooler discussions. It's the, oh, hey, Bob, hey, you're working on that other project. How's it going? And when he says, oh, we're trying to get this problem here, and we can, you know what? We solved that problem for our thing. But those kinds of little, just random interactions that would actually lead to development, those don't happen anymore when you're all doing it via Zoom, when you're all using only Microsoft Teams. You've isolated yourself and you don't have that important crosstalk that helps build community and again ties the team together. So certain organizations are saying, yeah, remote work is great, but we need to get together at least every once in a while. We need to know that we're
people. It didn't take long for big companies to realize that too and require their employees to show up for work. Yeah.
So if that's true there, well, you don't think it's more true socially? I mean, wow.
So gentlemen, let's transition into practical solutions here. What should we be doing to properly steward technology? What are some of your tips?
Well, I think 1 Corinthians 6 is the place to start on all this. All things are permitted for me, but not all things are of benefit. Right? All things are permitted for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. And at the point where you feel like you have to check your phone when you first wake up, if that's the first thing that you reach for,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
If it's the last thing you have to do before, or you can't go to bed on time because you have to, you're in trouble. There's some. So those are just some little warning signs that we're looking for. You can set specific time limits. You can set your router to
shut off at a certain time
and turn on at a certain time, so your kid's not up at 2:00 in the morning playing games, and you're not tempted either. The world is not going to dissolve. For hundreds and hundreds of years, we've lived without this technology. We'll be okay. I'm not saying you have to abandon it. You still need to buy airline tickets. There's things you can only do online, but yeah, you can do that, and we can have the church do digital detox days.
We can digital Sabbaths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I learned a song as a kid. Romans 16:19 says, "Be excellent at what is good, and be innocent at evil." Right. So I think that applies to media, and if it is excellent, if it is true, good, and beautiful, through the means of media, pursue it. If it is not, keep away from it. That's one of the principles we can apply. What I would say is that one of the things we can do is promote localism, right? Be connected to people in your locality, in your neighborhood, in your church, which is local church. And social media, basically, even online worship and everything, creates distance. Doesn't matter where you are around the world. You could be part of a social media church, right? An online church. But I think instead of that, make sure, if you're parents, find a local church to be part of. Form community, spend time, There is so much we can do together. Go on hikes, go do barbecue together. And we don't have to be hooked onto our gadgets all the time to have community and to really recognize those relationships in our lives. So I would say promote localism as much as possible, even within the family, within the church, and within the community in which we live.
Now, Jacob, I know you mentioned before, correct me if I'm wrong, but your church decided to not even just do live stream, right?
Correct.
It was, I talked to you
for
about
a time
that.
being, we understood the need for it, but later we understood that it is Scripture, in one sense, mandates for us to be gathered in physically, right? And it's important for us to, because that's where one of the key questions in front of us is that how can you create a unified church that's not only a church based on consumption, but every member is responsible to give towards the other member in terms of their time, in terms of their resources, in terms of their stories. How are
spiritual gifts?
Spiritual gifts. So it's what has happened with online churches is that we have become consumers of gathering, online gathering, whereas a physical church requires of you to really come together and be invested in the church as well in many other ways.
Yeah, I know there's been more than one occasion where you're walking to church and you see someone across the way that hey, Tom, how are you doing? Things are great. Oh, yeah, things are great. And you're like, and then you just keep looking at, no, something's off. Something. You can't do that online. You just call, hey, you're having a problem, brother. Can you tell me about it? You lose that if you're not there.
Yeah.
Again, spiritual gifts, when it says do not forsake the gathering of yourselves together as a matter of sun, it's because let's consider how to encourage one another in love and good deeds. That's the preceding verse. So everybody has spiritual gifts. When you don't avail yourselves of the congregation, not only you don't get the spiritual gifts that the congregation has, and they have different gifts than you. They may be able to speak into your issues and your needs in a way that you wouldn't have thought of. At the same time, you are denying them of your unique perspective and your unique gifts that you could serve others. So both sides are true, and it weakens the body.
And Scripture is very clear. Pastors and teachers and evangelists and all these offices are established for the sake of preparing the members for the work of ministry.
Right.
And ministry is not merely the means of words, but also in means of deeds within the body of Christ. And I think that's very much possible if we gather together in person.
Yeah. There's some practical tips. Let's say if you're a young family and you have teenagers, and you I know it's less common now, but if you're dining together as a family, perhaps the parents can make a rule and say no phones, not even on the table, not in your pocket, nowhere, like when you're eating together or when you're eating together at a restaurant.
Phone basket.
Phone basket.
Put them all in the basket. I'm going to take it to the other room.
Right.
There is good in there. At the same time, I think as parents, one has to really judge as to when is the right time to even allow for your kids to have social media. Allow for them to have any kind of phone, smartphone. Well, even that's a decision to be made.
Right. Well, like so that comedian, remember, he let his kids have phone.
You can, and there are those parents, again, who say, well, I need to be in touch with my children for picking them up after school and things like that. I'm a little skeptical about that because, again, when I was a kid, it was, hey, you be on the curb at 2:30 and then I'll come get you. And that's when you had to be at the curb. But you can buy a flip phone. Your 11-year-old, your 13-year-old does not need to have a smartphone in order to get in touch with you. Just a flip phone will do with no app access, and you still can call them.
And if it's an emergency, a responsible adult can do that.
That's right. The schools do have phones that you can actually reach your kids by calling the principal's office. That still works.
What other tips or disciplines can we introduce here? So again, I love what you guys said, but any personal things that actually worked with your family?
One of the things that's been interesting as an experiment is just times of silence. Just times of all media silence. Not even talk about online. I mean, find a place in nature. And Dallas Willard makes a big point about solitude. He talks about how Jesus would find a way to go up to the mountaintop and pray, especially before big events, right? He would have times of solitude. And Willard says it's the only time you can truly hear God. God will shape you in times and that's part of why I think we're afraid. We want the noise because otherwise we'll be too self-reflective and we'll start to actually think about these things.
One thing that I try to do is actually, if I have posted something, ministry related even, there are times when there are comments and responses and even sometimes questions. I have to really judge and make a judgment on, should I be responding to this now, or should I be taking care of my family, or should I be doing something else that is of priority? It's not an easy thing because you are always within yourself, I have to respond to that, I have to respond to that, but you have to really curtail those emotions and those desires and really focus on. So what matters is, I think what Augustine talks about, that you have to order your loves. And I think loving social media should be weighed down compared to loving other things in our lives.
Yeah. And you can schedule. I mean, I use a scheduler for posting my internet, social media posts, so that it starts off on a spreadsheet. The whole thing gets uploaded to a scheduler, and I don't have to go on the social media in order to make those posts. It's just easy to.
Or how about turning off notifications? You don't need to respond to every little ding and whatever ring.
Yeah.
So order your life so that you prioritize, like you're saying, the more important things, and the less important things, maybe you do it at the end of the day. Or maybe you decide after working hours, no phone whatsoever.
So I had a friend, a couple of very successful salesman friends who back before email, it was voice, right? You had voicemails, and his
pagers.
Yeah, his pattern was, I answer voicemails twice a day. I have a 10 a.m. and I have a 4:30 p.m. and then they started doing this with email. I will answer emails twice a day. But if I try to answer emails all the time, that's all I do, and I never actually get my work done.
Right.
So
he relegates it to specific time frames, and that makes sense. And we can do the same with social media.
Right.
And I would also say this. You can save all the time you want to by not using social media or other things. But if you're not investing that time for something good, it's equally bad.
I'm not using technology. I've actually pulled out the deck of cards to play solitaire.
So I think we need to really be engaging in that which is productive and empowering and enlightening. And one of the best things to do is read a good book. Pick up a good book. Talk to your friends in person. Go out on a hike or do things where you are more proximate to that which is real and tangible than which is in the air in some sense.
Yeah. So I know our time is almost ending. We only have a few minutes, but what are we actually saying in this show? If you're going to summarize the good, the bad, the ugly, I want to start with you, Jacob. What are we saying really on this topic?
What I would say is that social media, the online platform and everything, they are great tools. I'm so grateful for internet. It has really set free a lot of people because they have found truth through the means of that. Especially I'm talking about the nation I come from, India. There are a lot of people who have access to internet because of the good communication system. So it's a great tool. What I would say is that it should be a tool managed by human agency, not the other way around. And we need to be really cautious. And as I said in the beginning, let's be proactive in really putting measures to control it, to manage it, and to orient it. We are called to seek the kingdom first. How is it that we are seeking kingdom first in using these tools is a question in front of us as well.
How about you, Lenny? You'll have the last word.
Well, very similar to that. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. We don't take from that we should never have money, that we should all take vows of poverty. money was important. Matter of fact, Jesus didn't take that position either. He relied on funds, especially from donors, rich women and others, in order to help support his ministry, right? And when he needed an extra bit of money, he would be able to go out and get that. Paul was a tent maker. He would rely on his work and his efforts in order to help support him. But he didn't let money dictate his calling. He didn't let money dictate his ministry. His ministry dictated his need for money. And similarly, Christianity has always leveraged technology, from the earliest radio programs to television crusades, things like that, in order to reach people. But we can't let the technology drive us. We can't be mastered by it.
Well, thanks, Lenny. You have the last word. You've been listening to apologetics.com radio, where we challenge believers to think and thinkers to believe. Our hope is that you've learned some aspect about the Christian worldview that strengthens your faith and make you want to learn more. Special thanks to my panel this evening, Jacob and Lenny, to our behind-the-scenes engineer, and special thank you to you, our listeners. Until next time, good night.
Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.